I will hurt you for this.
I am the sword in the darkness.
Lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep.
Let me give you some advice, bastard.
Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
You should have been at my side. But instead, you chose to celebrate your own rise, laughing at me. Laughing with the whores and lickspittles. I have only ever defended you. In everything I've given you, you've thrown back in my face. I've decided to name a new heir.
What is up, everybody? Jeremy Icenfire here, and welcome to the channel. Throughout the course of Season 2, Daemon Targaryen has had a very peculiar storyline, to say the least. And now, with Season 2 nearing its completion, fans are left to wonder just how exactly will Daemon's story arc end this season. And what exactly was the purpose of Daemon's Harrenhal DMT Spirit Quest? And now, with a revelation in Episode 6, I think we are finally one step closer to understanding what all of these hallucinations are truly pointing to, and the lessons that they could potentially be trying to teach Daemon about his own quest for the Iron Throne. Now, on one hand, I definitely think a lot of them were meant to showcase to Daemon the sins of his past and confronting those sins so he can move forward in the future. But I also believe there might be one other underlying connection that a lot of these hallucinations seemingly share, and how the culmination of all of these hallucinations at Harrenhal was meant to showcase a simple lesson to Daemon, that he has not only failed his family at times in the past, but in this episode in particular, his failure as a brother. And how Daemon's own quest for the Iron Throne has ultimately led to a lot of his own problems to begin with, which I believe is going to be the most important lesson that Daemon is going to learn through these hallucinations at Harrenhal, as Daemon's relationship with Viserys is ultimately what forged him into the man he would go on to become. And in Episode 6, we see the return of King Viserys from beyond the grave to teach Daemon one final lesson. And I must admit, it was really awesome to see Paddy Considine's King Viserys return to House of the Dragon. The show just has not been the same in his absence.
I'm a Targaryen, baby. You know?
In Episode 6, we see Daemon have a very interesting hallucination of his brother Viserys, or rather a memory of a past conversation that the two of them have had. A conversation that would go on to have lasting consequences that I believe neither Daemon nor Viserys originally envisioned, after King Viserys officially unnames Daemon as his heir. And not only did we see this create a huge chip on Daemon's shoulder, in terms of trying to prove himself to his brother Viserys as worthy, but it also created a massive tension between the two brothers as well, causing them to often fight and make up, only to fight again. But also, I think the act of being removed as heir has affected Daemon in a much more profound way that maybe even he didn't fully realize at first, about how being unnamed as heir didn't hurt him nearly as much as finding out that Viserys no longer believed in him. When we take a look at King Viserys' cameo in Episode 6, we see almost word-for-word dialogue as their previous meeting, which of course was King Viserys scolding Daemon about how after the death of his wife and son Balon, instead of being at Viserys' side, Daemon was instead inside a brothel celebrating his own rise and boasting about the heir for a day, which is something I don't think Daemon fully realized just how much it wounded Viserys until this episode. This was, after all, Viserys' most darkest hour that he has ever faced, losing not only the love of his life, but also his newborn heir as well, something that he had been striving towards for a very long time, especially considering the manner in which they died and the horrible choice that Viserys had to make. This was certainly a time when he needed his brother more than ever, which is something Daemon finally starts to come to the realization of when we see Viserys make his second cameo in the episode, as we see a flashback of what appears to be not long after King Viserys loses his wife and son, as both of their bodies are present. A scene in which Daemon finally realizes that he was not there when his brother needed him most, and how he let his own personal feelings and vendettas stand in the way of being there for his brother during his darkest hour. It's finally hitting Daemon that not only did his brother really need him during this time, but I think it could also be hitting him that the very fact that he wasn't there for his brother is exactly why he was removed as heir in the first place, as it would ultimately be selfish moves like this that would lead to Viserys losing his confidence in Daemon as a successor, with the famous "heir for a day" quote only being the final straw that broke the camel's back. But at the end of the day, I do believe Daemon did finally have a breakthrough in episode 6 in terms of finally understanding just what some of these hallucinations were trying to tell him and facing some of the sins of his past, and how a lot of it stems right from this moment, which is not just the fact of Viserys unnaming him as heir, but more importantly, finding out that his big brother no longer believed in him, which I do believe deep down is the thing that ultimately hurt Daemon the most. And when we take a closer look at some of the other hallucinations that Daemon has been having in Season 2, we start to see an even deeper connection to his brother Viserys, like the very first one that Daemon had, that of young Rhaenyra sewing on the head of young Jaehaerys. And while most people are originally drawn to the visuals of this scene, it is the dialogue that I believe is a bigger standout. We hear young Rhaenyra say that you are always coming and going, and I always have to clean up after you, which of course is exactly the role that King Viserys has to play for Daemon their entire lives. Daemon, of course, is always getting off into trouble and creating big messes for Viserys to come behind and clean up afterwards. Young Rhaenyra's dialogue in this scene is an exact allegory for the relationship of Viserys and Daemon. And then we take a look at one of the more recent hallucinations of Daemon and his mother, and how we see Daemon seemingly projecting the idealistic version of his mother, and more specifically, a version of his mother that favors him over his brother Viserys, as we see her stating that Daemon is the stronger of the two brothers and the better leader, which of course is the perfect reflection of the rivalry that they shared. And while Daemon is confronting the mistakes of his past concerning his brother and other members of his family, I think he will also come to one final realization as well, not only due to these hallucinations, but also due to some very sage advice from Alice Rivers of all people in episode 6, about how those who strive for the crown are usually the most unfit to wear it, and that it is not a prize to be won, but a burden to bear. And even goes on to describe how even Daemon's brother Viserys did not originally want the position as well, but did his duty nonetheless. And ultimately, I do believe that these are going to be the fundamental lessons that Daemon learns from his time at Harrenhal, not only facing the mistakes of his past where his family is concerned, and how his quest to regain what he feels was stolen from him ultimately led to a lot of ruin. And as a result, I do believe we will see Daemon return to the rogue prince that we know and love, even if the DMT trip lasted a little longer than it should have. And again, seeing Paddy Considine return to House of the Dragon as King Viserys was an awesome treat. The show has definitely been missing his presence.
Why's my son wrapped in a shit rag? That's the scene, innit?
But that's going to do it today for our breakdown on the return of King Viserys and the potential explanation for some of these hallucinations. And definitely let me know your thoughts and comments down below. What do you think the overall purpose of these hallucinations for Daemon is going to be? And until next time, keep those tinfoil hats on, folks, and I will see you on the next one.
10 years you've been king, and yet not once have you asked me to be your hand.
Why would I do that?
Because I'm your brother. And the blood of the dragon runs thick